Stop right there. Before you take another step, before you scroll past this moment, I need you to understand something that will fundamentally alter how your brain processes reality. Right now, as you're reading these words, you're operating with only a fraction of your true cognitive potential. Your brain, this incredible 3-pound universe inside your skull, is running on outdated programming. And the worst part? You don't even know it. Let me ask you something brutal. How many times have you been manipulated this week without even realizing it? How many conversations have you had where someone was playing chess while you were playing checkers? How many times did you miss the hidden agenda, the subtle power play, the psychological trap that was set right in front of you? Most people go through their entire lives seeing only 10% of what's actually happening around them. They're walking through a world of shadows, convinced they're seeing in full light. But here's what Machiavelli discovered 500 years ago, something that the power elite have guarded like a state secret ever since. Your brain has a second operating system, a dark intelligence that sits dormant in 90% of people, waiting to be activated. And once you flip that switch, once you access this hidden layer of consciousness, you don't just become smarter, you become dangerous. You become impossible to deceive, impossible to manipulate, impossible to control. Today, you're going to learn the mental trick that separates wolves from sheep, emperors from subjects, predators from prey. This isn't about memorizing facts or improving your IQ score. This is about rewiring your perception so completely that you'll start seeing the invisible architecture of manipulation, power, and hidden intention that governs every human interaction. By the end of this, you won't just be smarter, you'll be operating on a completely different frequency than everyone around you. But I need to warn you about something first. Once you learn to see what I'm about to show you, you can't unsee it. The comfortable illusions that most people live inside will shatter. You'll start noticing things about people that make you uncomfortable. You'll see through lies in real time. You'll recognize manipulation attempts before they even finish the first sentence. Some of you will find this liberating. Others will find it isolating. Because once you access this level of perception, there's no going back to the innocent, trusting version of yourself. You'll be awake in a world of sleepers. Now write this statement in the comments. I choose to see reality as it truly is. This simple declaration is your commitment to the journey we're about to take together. Because what I'm about to teach you requires courage. It requires you to admit that everything you thought you knew about reading people, about understanding situations, about navigating social dynamics was incomplete at best and dangerously wrong at worst. Here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to tell you. Your brain wasn't designed to see reality clearly. It was designed to keep you safe, comfortable, and socially accepted. Every single day, your mind filters out 90% of the information coming at you, because processing everything would be overwhelming. But here's the problem with that filtering system. It's not neutral. It's biased toward making you vulnerable. It's programmed to trust, to assume good intentions, to take things at face value. And in a world full of people who understand manipulation, persuasion, and psychological warfare, that makes you prey. Think about the last time someone lied to you. Not a small lie, but a significant deception that affected your life, your job, your relationships, your resources. Now ask yourself this question honestly. Were there signs? Were there micro-expressions, verbal inconsistencies, behavioral patterns that didn't quite add up? Of course there were. There always are. But your brain dismissed them. It filtered them out, because acknowledging those warning signals would have required you to face an uncomfortable truth. Your default programming chooses comfort over accuracy every single time. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone in history. He watched as good, intelligent people were consistently outmaneuvered by those who understood the hidden layer of human interaction. He saw honest leaders destroyed by manipulative advisors. He witnessed brilliant minds trapped by simple psychological tricks. And he realized something profound. Intelligence without perception is just sophisticated blindness. You can have a genius-level IQ and still be completely blind to the games being played around you. So he developed what I call the Machiavellian mind hack, a systematic method for training your brain to see past the surface layer of reality and access the strategic depth that governs all human behavior. This isn't mysticism. This isn't philosophy. This is a practical, actionable framework for upgrading your perception so dramatically that you'll feel like you've been wearing a blindfold your entire life and someone just ripped it off. The technique starts with something Machiavelli called strategic paranoia. Now, before you misunderstand, this isn't about becoming anxious or distrustful. This is about training your brain to automatically run a second analysis on everything you encounter. When someone tells you something, your default programming accepts it at face value. Strategic paranoia asks 3 questions, instantly and automatically. What does this person gain if I believe this? What am I not being told? What would change if the opposite were true? These 3 questions, asked consistently, will reveal more about reality in 1 week than most people discover in a lifetime. Let me give you an example that will make this concrete. Someone at work offers to help you with a project. Your default programming hears those words and feels grateful. Strategic paranoia hears those same words and instantly analyzes. What does this person gain? Access to my work, visibility on my project, credit for the outcome, information about my methods. What am I not being told? That they're behind on their own work? That they need to look collaborative for an upcoming review? That they want to learn my techniques without admitting they don't know them? What would change if the opposite were true? If this isn't help but infiltration, I'm about to give away my advantages while taking on the risk of their involvement. See how different those 2 perceptions are? Same words, same situation, completely different reality. And here's what most people don't understand. Both perceptions might be partially correct. Maybe they genuinely want to help and they have secondary motives. But by only seeing the surface layer, you're making decisions with incomplete information. You're playing poker without looking at your own cards. Strategic paranoia doesn't make you cynical, it makes you complete. You're still free to trust, to collaborate, to accept help, but now you're doing it with your eyes open, with a full understanding of the strategic landscape. You're not being naive, you're being intelligent, and there's a massive difference between those 2 things. The second layer of the Machiavellian mind hack is what I call motive archaeology. Every action people take, every word they speak, every decision they make sits on top of a hidden foundation of motives. Most people only see the action. You need to train your brain to automatically excavate down to the foundation, because once you understand the true motive, predicting future behavior becomes almost mathematical. Here's how this works in practice. Someone suddenly becomes very friendly with you. Surface level, that feels good. Your brain releases oxytocin, you feel valued, you lower your guard. But motive archaeology asks different questions. What changed? Why now? What did they need that I have access to? What threat or opportunity appeared in their world that makes my proximity suddenly valuable? When you dig down to that foundation, you discover the real story. And 9 times out of 10, the real story has nothing to do with you personally. You're a strategic asset, not a friend. Understanding that distinction will save you from 1,000 betrayals. Machiavelli wrote that men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find someone willing to be deceived. He wasn't insulting humanity. He was identifying a fundamental truth about how our brains work. We want to believe, we want to trust, we want to take things at face value because it's cognitively easier than constant analysis. But that desire to believe is the vulnerability that sophisticated manipulators exploit with surgical precision. The third element of this mental upgrade is pattern recognition at the behavioral level. Most people experience interactions as isolated events. Someone does something, you react, life moves on. But sophisticated observers see patterns. They notice that this person always asks for favors when you're busy. That colleague always takes credit in front of superiors, but shares blame in private. That friend always needs something right after you've had success. These aren't coincidences, these are patterns. And patterns reveal character in ways that single incidents never can. Your brain is actually incredible at pattern recognition. That's how you learned language, how you navigate social situations, how you survived childhood. But your pattern recognition is being suppressed by your social programming. You've been taught that noticing patterns in people's behavior is judgmental, cynical, or paranoid. So you dismiss the patterns your brain is showing you. You give people the benefit of the doubt. You tell yourself stories about why this time is different, and that's exactly how you end up repeatedly surprised by predictable behavior. Activating dark intelligence means giving yourself permission to trust your pattern recognition again. When your instincts tell you something feels off, that's not anxiety. That's your subconscious pattern matching system identifying a deviation from baseline behavior. Something changed, something doesn't fit, and your conscious mind needs to pay attention to that signal instead of dismissing it as unfounded suspicion. Now here's where this gets really powerful. The fourth layer is strategic simulation. Before you enter any important interaction, negotiation, or conversation, you're going to train your brain to run simulations. What does this person want from this interaction? What's their best case outcome? What's their worst case outcome? What tactics might they use to move toward their best case? What would I do if I were them and I had no moral constraints? That last question is crucial because it reveals the outer boundary of possibility. Most people won't go there, but knowing where that boundary is helps you recognize when someone is approaching it. This isn't about becoming paranoid or assuming everyone is malicious. This is about being strategically prepared. Machiavelli said it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But he understood that the truly sophisticated don't choose between fear and love, they choose between blindness and sight. And once you can see clearly, you can respond appropriately to whatever reality presents. Let me show you how this changes everyday interactions in ways that will multiply your effectiveness. Someone makes a request that sounds reasonable on the surface. Your old programming would evaluate the request based on its merits. Can you do it? Do you have time? Is it fair? But your upgraded intelligence evaluates it strategically. What precedent does this set? How does this shift the power dynamic? What will they ask for next if this is successful? What am I signaling about my boundaries if I agree? What am I signaling about my priorities if I refuse? These questions turn a simple request into a strategic decision point. The fifth element is what I call consequence projection. Most people think in terms of immediate outcomes. If I do this, that happens. But sophisticated thinkers project out 3, 5, 10 moves ahead. If I do this, that happens, which enables them to do this, which positions me here, which creates this vulnerability, which they could exploit by doing this. It sounds complex, but your brain can learn to do this automatically once you train it. It's the same skill chess players develop, just applied to social and professional dynamics instead of a board. Here's a practical exercise that will start developing this skill immediately. For the next 7 days, every time someone asks you for something, before you answer, project 3 consequences. If I say yes, what happens? If I say no, what happens? If I counteroffer with conditions, what happens? Then project 1 level deeper. For each of those outcomes, what becomes possible next? You'll be shocked at how quickly this reveals opportunities and dangers that were invisible before. The sixth layer is emotional literacy, but not the kind you've been taught. You don't need to become more emotionally expressive. You need to become more emotionally diagnostic. Learn to read micro-expressions, vocal tonality, body language inconsistencies. When someone's words say yes, but their body language says no, that gap is information. When someone claims to be calm, but their voice pitch rises, that dissonance is data. Most people ignore these signals because acknowledging them would require confrontation or uncomfortable questions. But you're not most people anymore. You're someone who values accuracy over comfort. The seventh and final element is what I call strategic empathy. This is not emotional empathy, where you feel what others feel. This is cognitive empathy, where you understand what others want, fear, and value. You model their decision-making process in your mind. You can predict their behavior not because you're psychic, but because you understand their incentive structure. You know what they're optimizing for, what constraints they're operating under, what pressures they're responding to. When you develop strategic empathy, manipulation becomes almost impossible because you see the manipulation before it happens. You recognize the setup. You identify the psychological buttons they're trying to push, and you can choose not to react in the way they expect. This doesn't make you cold or calculating. It makes you free from invisible control, free from unconscious influence, free from strategic deception. But here's what most people miss about this entire framework. The Machiavellian mind hack doesn't just protect you from manipulation, it also makes you exponentially more effective at achieving your own goals. Because once you understand how people think strategically, how incentives drive behavior, how power dynamics actually work, you can navigate any situation with precision. You know which battles to fight and which to avoid. You know when to push and when to wait. You know how to position your ideas so they seem to originate from others. You know how to build alliances that actually serve your interests instead of draining your resources. This is the difference between being smart and being strategically intelligent. Smart people have knowledge. Strategically intelligent people have perception. And in any conflict between knowledge and perception, perception wins every time. Because knowledge tells you what's theoretically possible, while perception tells you what's actually happening. Now, I want you to understand something critical about this transformation. When you activate this level of awareness, some people in your life are going to feel uncomfortable around you. They won't be able to articulate why, but they'll sense that their usual tactics don't work anymore. The people who were subtly manipulating you will become frustrated. The people who were taking advantage of your naivety will find new targets. This isn't because you've become hostile or difficult. It's because you've become aware, and awareness disrupts exploitation. Some relationships will fall away. That's not a failure. That's a filtration system working correctly. The people who remain in your life will be those who prefer authentic connection over strategic advantage. And those relationships will become deeper and more meaningful because they're based on genuine mutual value rather than unconscious exploitation. Machiavelli faced this isolation himself. Once he saw the mechanisms of power clearly, he could never unsee them. He was too aware to participate in the comfortable fictions that most people live inside. But that awareness also made him one of the most influential thinkers in human history. His insights have survived 5 centuries because they're based on accurate observation of human nature, not wishful thinking about how humans should behave. The choice in front of you right now is simple but irreversible. You can close this video, go back to your regular programming, continue operating at 10% perception. Or you can commit to developing these 7 layers of strategic intelligence, to training your brain to see what's actually happening instead of what you're comfortable believing is happening. If you choose the second path, start with strategic paranoia. For the next 7 days, ask those 3 questions about everything significant that someone tells you. What do they gain if I believe this? What am I not being told? What would change if the opposite were true? Don't act on this information yet. Just practice seeing the second layer of reality. Let your brain get comfortable with the idea that surface appearances and underlying reality are often very different things. Then add motive archaeology. For everything people do, especially when it seems generous or unexpected, dig down to the foundational motive. What changed in their world that makes this action make sense? What need, threat, or opportunity is driving this behavior? Again, you're not judging, you're observing. You're collecting data about how humans actually operate versus how they claim to operate. Layer on pattern recognition. Start keeping a mental file on the people in your life, not to weaponize against them, but to understand them accurately. When someone does something that surprises you, ask yourself if it actually fits a pattern you've been ignoring. Your brain will show you patterns you didn't consciously know you were tracking. Then begin strategic simulation before important interactions. Game out the possibilities. What might they want? How might they try to get it? What's my actual bottom line versus my stated position? This turns you from a reactive participant into a strategic player in your own life. Develop consequence projection by forcing yourself to think 3 moves ahead. What happens if this happens, and then what? And then what? And then what? Your brain will resist this at first because it's more work than reacting in the moment. But this skill becomes automatic with practice. Train your emotional literacy by watching people's nonverbal communication as carefully as you listen to their words. Notice discrepancies. When body language contradicts verbal content, trust the body language. It's much harder to consciously control. And finally, build strategic empathy by constantly asking yourself what you would do if you were them, given their constraints, incentives, and information. This turns other people from mysterious agents into comprehensible strategic actors whose behavior you can predict and prepare for. Here's what happens when you integrate all 7 layers. You start operating at a level of social and strategic intelligence that feels almost supernatural to people who can't see what you're seeing. You navigate complex situations with ease because you understand the hidden architecture. You avoid traps that catch others because you recognize the setup. You build alliances that actually serve your interests because you understand what each party truly values. You become very difficult to manipulate because you see manipulation attempts in real time. But perhaps most importantly, you become much more effective at achieving what you actually want in life. Because you're no longer wasting time and energy on surface-level activities while missing the deeper game being played all around you. You're playing chess while others play checkers. And once you learn to see the board clearly, winning becomes a matter of patience and precision rather than luck and hoping. Machiavelli wrote that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. He understood that intelligent people naturally attract other intelligent people, while naive people attract exploiters. When you activate this dark intelligence, when you develop these 7 layers of perception, you automatically filter your social circle. The manipulators and energy vampires find easier targets. The strategic and authentic people recognize a kindred spirit. This is not about becoming cynical or cold. This is about becoming complete, about using the full capacity of your cognitive abilities instead of operating at a fraction of your potential because you've been socialized to ignore your own perception. Your instincts are correct far more often than your social programming wants you to believe. That uncomfortable feeling when something doesn't add up is accurate information that your conscious mind is dismissing. The Machiavellian mind hack simply gives your instincts permission to be heard. It creates a systematic framework for taking your subconscious pattern recognition and bringing it into conscious awareness where you can act on it strategically. This makes you more authentic, not less, because you're honoring your actual perception instead of performing the naive trust that society expects from you. Now write this in the comments. I activate my dark intelligence. This statement is your declaration that you're done operating at partial awareness, that you're ready to see reality as it actually is, not as you've been taught to pretend it is, that you're willing to be uncomfortable in exchange for being accurate. The world is full of people operating at surface level, taking things at face value, trusting blindly, and then feeling shocked when they're exploited. You don't have to be one of them. The choice is yours. But understand that once you make this choice, once you train your brain to see the hidden layer of reality, there's no going back to innocent blindness. You'll see manipulation attempts everywhere. You'll notice power dynamics in every interaction. You'll recognize strategic positioning in conversations that used to seem casual. Some of you will find this depressing at first. The comfortable illusion that most people are straightforward and honest will shatter. But it will be replaced by something far more valuable: clear sight, accurate understanding, strategic capability, and ultimately, freedom. Freedom from unconscious influence, freedom from invisible control, freedom from being a pawn in games you didn't know were being played. This is what Machiavelli gave the world. Not a handbook for evil, but a manual for seeing clearly in a world where most people prefer comfortable delusions over uncomfortable truths. And 500 years later, his insights remain radical because most people still choose blindness over sight. But you're not most people. You're someone who watched this far, Someone who recognized that there's a level of intelligence beyond what you've been taught. Someone ready to access the dark intelligence that's been dormant in your mind, waiting for permission to activate. That permission starts now. Use these 7 layers. Practice them daily. Watch as your perception expands and your effectiveness multiplies. And most importantly, never forget that the person who sees clearly will always have an advantage over those who only see what they want to see. Welcome to the next level. Welcome to strategic intelligence. Welcome to the Machiavellian mind.